Hello and welcome to the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter, and I've been your beat reporter covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for On SI every single day since August 2019, and we are continuing to move forward through another training camp together. As always, you can find all of our 100% free, 24/7 boots on the ground content covering the Jacksonville Jaguars when you follow us each day on social media such as Facebook and Twitter at Jaguars on SI. You can also find us at www.si.com/NFL/Jaguars. All right, folks, welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. There is a lot to talk about today as the Jacksonville Jaguars held their first padded practice of the entire Liam Cohen, James Gladstone, and Tony Boselli era on Monday. It was a physical practice. I expect the physicality to be ramped up even more so moving forward, but it was definitely a tone setter, in my opinion, to start for the rest of training camp. Now, there's obviously a lot of things that we can talk about, a lot of things we witnessed. If you want the full 100% disclosure and notebook of what I witnessed, saw, heard, whatever you want to call it, at training camp on Monday at the Amelia Electric Center, please go read our training camp notebook on Jaguars on SI. But today there's a few specific things I want to talk about, that we saw from the Jaguars training camp on Monday. The first one to me has to be the defensive ends. I thought Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker might have been the two best players on the field for Monday's practice. Both of those guys just completely got after the Jaguars' offensive tackles, whether it was in team drills where each was getting pressure, each was getting near the quarterback, even though, as Liam Cohen said after practice, that the quarterbacks were getting the ball out of their hands a little quicker. It seemed like there were a lot of quick concepts, not a lot of quarterbacks just sitting in the pocket kind of scanning the field. But I'm somebody who, ever since Trayvon Walker got drafted in 2022, I'd venture to say I've seen 95% or more of the reps that he has taken in one-on-one pass rush drills. And, of course, there's always context required for one-on-one pass rush drills. The offensive linemen especially are always kind of put at a disadvantage. But I think this drill is the perfect testament to how Trayvon Walker has developed and how he's taken a leap since being drafted by the Jaguars with the first pick. I remember as a rookie watching Trayvon Walker at Episcopal in those drills. Just the difference between him and Josh Hines-Allen, for example, in 2022 was vast. You could see it. This was one guy who was close to mastering his craft, and it was one guy who was just starting on his developmental journey as a defensive end. Now, since then, Trayvon has obviously taken big leaps as a player. His rookie year was by far his least productive year. He's had really productive seasons as a pass rusher in back-to-back seasons. But the big thing to me when watching Trayvon Walker on Monday was just seeing how natural and really how dominant he was in this drill. Because this isn't a drill that was made for Trayvon Walker of a few years ago. That, like I said, this was the drill where Trayvon Walker was consistently kind of struggling. And on Monday, he just put on an absolute dominant performance. Walker Little had issues with him. Anton Harrison had issues with him. Each tackle also had issues with Josh Hines-Allen, of course. But Trayvon especially, you could just see the power, the explosion, the speed, the way he was coming off the ball and dipping around the edge. He was winning in different ways. I thought it was an absolute dominant, elite performance by Trayvon Walker in a setting that has not always been his game. So again, I think if you're just looking at how Trayvon Walker has progressed since his rookie year to the player he is now, I don't think there's any argument how much better he's gotten. I think the only thing to talk about is how much better can he get? Because he still has a high ceiling. He's still an incredibly young player. He's had 2 back-to-back very productive seasons as a pass rusher. 20 and a half sacks over the last 2 seasons. I think with Trayvon that the biggest thing this year is to improve in terms of getting pressures. He's a good finisher, and he did improve in pressures, win rates, etc. over the last few years. But to me, if he can take that step forward, that to me is a telltale sign of him becoming a truly ascending edge rusher. But in terms of Monday's practice, Trayvon, Josh Hines-Allen both were, to me, just really unblockable. Other things I noticed in pass rush one-on-ones. They had pass rush one-on-ones on one end of the field. They had wide receivers versus defensive backs on the other side of the field. I caught some of the wide receiver defensive backs, certainly not all of them. I did catch, I'd say, the entirety or close to it of the offensive line versus defense line. And it was mostly starters. I liked what they did. They split it into two groups. One group of starters against starters, one group of backups against backups. And watching the starter group, a few things stood out. One to me was that Ezra Cleveland and Robert Hainsey both had solid performances. Ezra Cleveland, I think, went 3 for 3, 4 for 4, something along those lines. I don't think I saw Ezra Cleveland get beat during this drill. And Robert Hainsey, another guy, this has famously been a drill that I'd say Luke Fortner has not always thrived in. So those in Jacksonville have seen, centers kind of struggle in this drill over recent years. I thought Hainsey had a solid first day. I thought that he was doing well in terms of, anchoring against a strong, powerful rusher like Devon Hamilton. He had another good rep against Tyler Lacey. I'd say outside of Trayvon and Josh being so dominant, the most interesting thing I saw from those one-on-ones, DeJuan Smoot rushing from the 3 technique position. DeJuan Smoot rushed against the right guard, Chuma Edoga, who, Edoga's, I think, has looked solid since Patrick McCary went down and since he's kind of stepped into that right guard role for the Jaguars at practice. For the first day of pads, there was one play in team drills where him and Anton Harrison had a double team where they just got completely uprooted the defender and gap movement. And you could see after the play how fired up Chuma was about it, how he had some edge to him. And that's what James Gladstone talked about when he signed Chuma Edoga. So I've been, I'd say, pleasantly surprised. And it's funny, we went through this entire offseason saying, is it going to be Chuma or Anton at right tackle? This is likely largely because of the injury to Patrick McCarry, dealing with back spasms. Liam Cohen said not a long-term thing, but we've seen Chuma go to right guard instead. And again, he's been a player that I think I've been impressed by. You haven't seen any Wyatt Milam at right guard. He's stuck at left guard. Fred Johnson is stuck at left tackle, etc. On the other side of things, does seem like the Jaguars, there are some bumps and bruises kind of stacking up a little bit. Patrick McCary is out. Liam Cohen said it won't be an extended period of time, but not positive that there is an exact, date that he's set to come back either. Of course, back injuries are always kind of a finicky thing. Buster Brown, Liam Cohen said, will miss the rest of training camp with a leg injury. That's a potential big blow. And not because it means he's going to be out for a long time, because Liam Cohen, of course, said that he expects him to be ready for the regular season, etc. But Buster Brown had a stellar offseason program. Buster Brown looked like he was born to play in this defense. Like every other scheme that he's been in, every other coaches he's had, it's been to prepare him to kind of play in Anthony Campanelli's defense. And I think that most people were under the assumption that entering training camp, Buster had a pretty good chance to be the other outside cornerback in 3 cornerback sets, as long as Travis Hunter wasn't playing defense. Now, with Buster down for at least the rest of training camp, I think that gives a guy like Jarian Jones a really good shot to get in there, kind of earn some reps, earn some playing time. I think Jarian has had a good training camp as well. He's been very active. He's gotten his hands on a few footballs. Overall, I'd say the starting secondary. Darnell Savage has had near interceptions and back-to-back days where he's broken up deep passes. I think it's been a strong offseason for the secondary, especially. One more injury that kind of stood out, Bayshao Tootin did not practice on Monday with a hamstring injury. We'll see how long he's out, but hamstring injuries are kind of the dreaded ones, when it comes, especially the skill players or, guys who are just doing a lot of movement. That's been a big issue with Tyson Campbell, over the last few years. We will see, obviously, how long it takes Tootin to get back on the field, but that did make it seem like it was a Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne day. Tank Bigsby dominated in terms of reps and snaps over the previous 2 days of practice, but it felt a lot more balanced, a lot more split during Monday's practice. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode. please make sure you go like, subscribe, follow, whatever you got to do on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all other podcast platforms at the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. You can also find us on YouTube at Sports Videos on SI.